Well, we've danced around the topic here a little bit. It's been discussed, widely discussed throughout, local media and around the country regarding the quarterback position for the Detroit Lions. And you and I both believe that Jared Goff is a good quarterback. He's good enough for now. I don't think either of us think that in the last 2 minutes of a game, he's the guy that you necessarily want to go out there and break the game open, make the play, but hopefully he's good enough to be able to avoid most of those situations. But there are 4 quarterbacks that people are talking about in regards to the first round of the NFL draft. And you could throw in a fifth and Hendon Hooker, who, give or take, depending on what a team needs, when they need a quarterback available and where they have him ranked, along with his age. We can discuss him at a later date. But the 4 quarterbacks that I think we all believe will be first-round quarterbacks are Bryce Young, Will Levis, C.J. Stroud, Anthony Richardson. And I would like to know from you, where do you think these quarterbacks end up in the NFL draft? And how many do you think go in the top 5?
Well, I think, first of all, if I'm Carolina, obviously
you traded up for a reason.
You traded up, and look, they can either – I know they've said, hey, they feel good about a couple guys. They probably feel really good about one. Nobody's going to know until draft night. But to me, that's probably going to be Bryce Young. I know C.J. Stroud has been, his name's definitely been a lot hotter in the last couple weeks. Had a pretty good showing at the Combine. Had a pretty good pro day. Listen, football players, coaches, evaluators, I could care less. I'm sorry, I couldn't care less.
Oh, thank you for being grammatically correct.
On how a guy looks throwing on air. I just can't. I will never see a pass in the Combine, in a pro day, and get excited about it and go, oh my God, this guy's tremendous. Don't give a rat's ass. I just don't. Unless you throw it like 95 yards, I'd be like, okay, that's pretty ridiculous. That's cool. But everybody can throw the ball 65 yards,
65, 70
yards. Yeah. Everybody can throw the ball on air when there's no rush, when there's no defenders, when the guy's running 85% speed. So that I don't care.
There's no coverage. You're not reading anything. Right. There's no pressure. There's no rush.
To me, the better quarterback is Bryce Young. And I know that there's the height concern, right? I know that 5'10" is not ideal. But I also know that it's not ideal. But I also know that, look, it's not like at the NFL level you're going to have guys that are 4, 5, 6 inches taller than what he played with at Alabama and played against in the SEC.
Yeah.
Right? Alabama's got a bunch of 6'5", 6'6" offensive linemen. Georgia's defensive line obviously had a bunch of 6'7", 6'6" guys. You know what I mean? So it's not going to be a huge issue in my opinion. And look, I mean, you look at Russ Wilson, he's not the biggest guy. Drew Brees wasn't the biggest guy. I mean, you find ways to get through. And Bryce Young, to me, he was the better quarterback. And I think he's going to be the better quarterback at the next level. I'm always a little bit hesitant when it comes to Ohio State guys, quarterbacks. And part of it is probably, being a Michigan fan and you kind of have that rivalry. But also part of it is, you watch Ohio State play and you're like, I've never seen receivers more wide open.
Right.
Like there's so many quarterbacks that can just lob a ball out there and, have great stats when you're playing at Ohio State. I mean, they've got just such a
Urban Meyer, Ryan Day offense,
just
recruiting machine.
Great system where it's like, man, wide open. And sure, C.J. Stroud made some incredible throws, especially in that the playoff game. Even the Michigan game, watching that closely, yes, I thought he was a good quarterback. To me, it's just Bryce Young I think is better. I think he's going to end up there at number 1. I think C.J. Stroud, look, Houston probably going to end up with C.J. Stroud. We obviously know that they're probably the furthest team in the NFL away from competing. They've probably got the longest rebuild out of any of those teams picking in the top 5. I would say 2 quarterbacks, definitely first, second. Look, there's been some talks about Arizona trying to move out of that number 3 spot. Whether that's, I think it was maybe the Raiders, a little bit of talk of there, maybe I think even the Falcons kind of got thrown in there. They're going into the year with Desmond Ridder, who is a bit of an unknown. But Colts, I think, probably definitely go quarterback. Obviously, we know that Matt Ryan is no longer there. They are probably the best team in the top 5 that has the best chance of a quick turnaround, because the rest of the roster over there in Indianapolis is pretty solid. They were in the playoffs just a couple years ago. So I would definitely picture them taking a quarterback.
So
I would say at least 3. I don't know if 4 unless there's a trade to get there. Maybe you can have 1, 2, 3, 4. Obviously that would have to include Anthony Richardson, who has been the hottest topic over the past month. I don't see it,
love him.
But I mean,
you and I both know it only takes one team.
Yeah, and John, that there's
more than one team.
NFL coaches are egomaniacs. Everybody looks at a player and say, "Oh, I can fix him, right? I can do that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Give me that player, right? I'll turn him into this. I'll do that." Right? Coaches are a bit egomaniac when it comes to viewing prospects like that. I think me and you are alike, where we're just old school. Look at the film. What does the film tell me? How does he play, right? What throws is he making? And look, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm some expert quarterback evaluator. I'm certainly not. But I just don't – I mean, there seems to be – when you watch C.J. Stroud, when you watch Bryce Young, for me, my amateur eyes, there's a pretty big discrepancy between the next group of quarterbacks, which would be an Anthony Richardson, which would be, the Will Levis, or even maybe Hendon Hooker, if he wasn't coming off of that ACL injury.
Right.
I think there's a huge gap. But look, I think there's so many teams that are enamored with Anthony Richardson, because the NFL, John, and you know this, you played 10 years, I played 10 years. The NFL is very cyclical, right? Whatever the new fad is going to last for a couple years, and then it's going to go away. And then, the power game's going to come back up. And then in 5 years from now, the spread's going to come back until teams start to stop it. Right now, the kind of fad, again, is everybody's enamored with the athletic quarterback, right? Everybody's enamored with what Jalen Hurts did, what Justin Fields was able to do as far as running out of the backfield as a quarterback, right? What even guys like Josh Allen, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of enamored with that right now, that, we need to get a running quarterback, right? We need to get an athlete back there, a guy that can run, add another dimension to our offense. It's going to last for a couple more years, and then it's probably going to go away, and you're going to see more of the pro-style guys make a return. But right now, I think teams are starting to fall into that trap a little bit as well, where they think that this is the new trend, and you're going to have at least one team that is going to fall in love with Anthony Richardson based off of his athleticism, and says, you know what, we'll fix the arm, right? We'll fix the timing. We'll fix the footwork. We'll fix all that. Just give me a great athlete, and we can make it work.
So, okay. The first 2 quarterbacks are off the board. Carolina takes Bryce Young. Houston takes C.J. Stroud. And you can flip them, whatever. I don't care. I think we both agree that they're going 1-2. And then Arizona stands pat. They take Will Anderson at 3. Now at 4, you're the GM of the Indianapolis Colts. Who are you taking if you've determined that you've got to take a quarterback? Who are you taking between Anthony Richardson and Will Levis?
Oh boy.
Kick you right in the balls.
That's a hard one. You have to make a choice. That's a hard one. Look, I don't know much about Will Levis. I don't. I mean, you watch a little bit of what you can, on the internet, and hey, replays, highlights. Obviously, highlights are everybody's going to fall in love with highlights.
Yeah.
To me, you have to watch the games. You have to watch, consecutive games, 2, 3, 4 games. Who's he playing against? I've tried to watch a lot of those. Like I said, I'm not a great evaluator of the quarterback position. But to me, if it was my choice, this is damned if you do, damned if you don't, isn't it?
Well, because like you said, the upside for Anthony Richardson is huge.
Yeah.
But and we've seen a guy like Josh Allen come from a school that wasn't at all the caliber of Florida. His completion percentage was in the low 50s. Anthony Richardson right now playing in the SEC, we get all of that, but the fact that his completion percentage was in the low 50s, 52%, I believe, and now you make that jump to the NFL, it just doesn't come to fruition that you become a 63% passer, 65% passer. That's the big concern I have about him. And Will Levis, while there's still a lot of work to be done with both of these prospects, I think that Will Levis, if I'm Indianapolis, I take Will Levis simply because I don't want to gamble with that number 4 overall pick. Every pick is a gamble in the NFL draft. You have no idea what's going to happen or how these players are going to develop, and how their game translates to the NFL. There's different markers. There's different, indicators where you could try and put your best guess out there. That's why I think completion percentage in college is a major indicator for what can possibly be. Yeah, Josh Allen has improved, but without Brian Daboll, who was his coordinator, is now with the Giants, no longer there. He took a step back this year.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of guys that are the, quote unquote quarterback whisperer that can wave a wand and all of a sudden improve them so much that they go from a 52% completion percentage and in a year, 2 years, 3 years become very efficient in the NFL.
Yeah. And I think I would probably go on the flip side with you as far as if you were into who you would take. I think I would take Anthony Richardson, and mostly I think because he fits the scheme that you're trying to implement, right? Indianapolis's new head coach, Shane Steichen, offensive coordinator from Philadelphia, right? Had Jalen Hurts, incorporated the read option into the game, incorporated all of those quarterback runs we saw last year.
Will Levis's game too.
Will Levis, here you go. Will Levis, 72 carries last year for minus 107 yards. And look, I know a lot of those are sacks because in the college game, the sacks, it comes out of your rushing yards, not your passing yards. Will Levis, can he run? Okay, he can. Not like Anthony Richardson. No. I mean, if you're truly trying to,
not at all.
Like if you're trying to implement a quarterback run offense, a read option offense, you're definitely going to take Anthony Richardson over Will Levis. I don't think Will Levis is a guy you want to build a read option offense around, right? So putting those together, and look, if I'm Indy too, I mean, there might be a chance that you're looking for all the reasons I just mentioned, the offensive coordinator from Philly coming over. Now he's your head coach. Is he going to implement the same style of offense? Is there a chance that they could go after Lamar Jackson? I know that it seems like no teams are going to give up the asking price of 2 first-rounders as well as having to pay an enormous guaranteed contract. But that for me could be a trade or a draft day type deal where, hey, Baltimore, figure out this deal. This is what we're going to pay him. We'll give you this number 4 pick. We'll take Lamar Jackson. That way they get a little bit more of a proven commodity, but also a guy that can run that similar offense as to what Shane Steichen ran with Jalen Hurts out in Philly.
So here's my only concern about Anthony Richardson. And yes, and I misquoted earlier. It's not 52%, it's 53.8% was his completion percentage last year.
Oh, how dare you?
I know. But I do like to be accurate. But when you look at the best teams that he played against this year, and some of his hype throughout the course of the college football season happened in week 1, and a lot of people were living off that, where they played Utah, and Utah was a good defense this year. He was 17 of 24, which obviously is 70% completion percentage. But then you look and you say, okay, the next week they played against a number 20 ranked Kentucky, 40% completion percentage. Against Tennessee, another loss, 54% completion percentage. Against LSU, and not a great team this year, a little bit better at 60%. Georgia, and now everybody was bad against Georgia in that defense, 48%. Florida State, 33%. All of his best performances, save maybe the Eastern Washington game or the LSU game that I mentioned, the big games that he played in were his worst in terms of completion percentage. It's not going to get easier in the NFL.
Yeah. And look, I do see some stats. I do see some clips that, national pundits will put out, and, statistics from the passing game, right? All that. I think Florida, one of the big stats, which helps Anthony Richardson, was I think their receivers were top 5 in the nation at dropping balls.
Yeah.
Which obviously that's going to hurt the quarterback. With that being said, though, it's just it's such a weird situation. There's either some people that are so convicted that, this guy is going to be an absolute stud, take the NFL by storm, and there's people like us who I think are a little bit more on the fence that there's a chance he could be great.
Yeah.
What's there a better chance of? Him becoming an all-pro type guy and a guy that you can build your team around for 10, 12, 15 years, or a guy that's going to be a flash in the pan, like we've seen with a lot of these running quarterbacks over the past 10 years that, hey, they look pretty good, might, going to have their highlights are going to be incredible.
Yeah.
But are those guys that you're going to, franchise or that build your franchise around? I don't know. I mean, I never root against a kid, especially a kid coming out of college. But look, these are big decisions that teams have to make. I don't want to see Anthony Richardson fail. I don't want to see him go out there and suck at quarterback so I can say, oh, I told you so. What were those teams thinking, right? Nobody wants to do that.
No.
But at the same breath,
it's inevitable. It's going to happen to somebody.
It's going to happen to somebody. It does every year, right? And it happens multiple times every year.
Yeah.
So I don't want to – I'm certainly not going to get into that game where, hey, who's the bust going to be, who's the sleeper's going to – that's something that I don't think neither of us are interested in. But it's certainly going to give us something exciting to talk about.
Yeah.
Once the season kicks off, wherever he ends up. I think there, even with thinking about – everybody's pretty convinced. I think most people, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, 1-2, whatever way it falls.
Yeah.
But once the season starts off, Anthony Richardson is probably going to be a guy that everybody wants to see play because he's the biggest I'm not going to say risk, but maybe the biggest question mark, right? Yeah. Guy's either going to be a stud or the guy's
going to be a dud.
Going to be a dud, man. And we're going to have to wait a long time to find out, but it's certainly an enamoring and exciting conversation to be had.
And the reason I ask about how many quarterbacks are going to go in the top 4, obviously the Lions pick 6, and I think there's 4 that go in the top 5. I do think Seattle, the way that they structured Geno Smith's contract, it could be a 1-year deal, and they could groom another guy, and then all of a sudden, hey, they're off and running, hopefully on a stunted rebuild. That in a team that made the playoffs last year, who knows what they do this year? But it all leads up to what the Lions do at number 6. And before we start talking about that pick or other picks in the draft, I do want to ask you, following free agency, we haven't gotten to the draft yet. They brought Marvin Jones Jr. back. So they've added a wide receiver to the room after losing DJ Shark. They added Montgomery in the backfield. On the defensive side, we know that they addressed the secondary, 3 guys in the secondary. The entire secondary might have a completely different look, say for some of the young guys that played last year, and we'll see what Tracy Walker, how he recovers from his Achilles. What's the biggest need for this team now, and how does it relate to the draft?
Front seven.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think for me, it's being able to stop the run.
Yeah, and
you can never have too many guys to put pressure on a quarterback.
I agree with you, and I think that starts up front, right? The better front 4 you have, the better success your linebackers are going to have, right? That's just a fact, right? It's going to free those guys up, and sometimes having an all-pro linebacker doesn't really matter if your defensive line
blows,
can't stop anybody, and is getting pushed into the linebacker's lap, right? So, I mean, for me, it's still that interior defensive line spot. And look, I know that it's not easy to find guys that can go play 3 downs, that can stop the run first and second, and also get after the passer on third. I know that's really, really hard to do. There is a guy in this draft that we all know that's pretty damn good at that when it comes to playing football.
Yeah.
Everything on the outside, question marks. Certainly.
Obviously,
flags,
in case you've had your head in a hole, it's Jalen Carter.
Yeah. And there's, it seems like every week there's something new. And look, I think this week was the police video came out. I watched it. Didn't think there was anything damning there. I mean, whatever you want to call it. It didn't really change my opinion.
Countering that, Drew Rosenhaus's agent has come out and said that he is only going to visit teams in the top 10. Not if you have a pick outside the top 10, he's not visiting the team. Even if he gets invited, he's not going to pay much attention to them. He's also made the statement that I'm confident Jalen will go in the top 10. He's a good person, a family man, loves football, and a generational talent. We don't know the answer to any of those. We can't confirm. We can't deny. We can't, we don't know what those answers are.
I think we know he's pretty good football talent.
That's the one thing but a generational talent. I mean, that's a different level, and he certainly has that potential.
Yeah.
But we won't know the answer to that for a few years.
Yeah. It could be a bluff too. I mean, I don't think that any agents right now truly know. Certainly there's teams that express interest, right? We want to bring him in for a visit. We want to talk to him a little bit more, whatever it may be. I don't think any agent knows, hey, you're going, number 5 to Seattle, right? I don't think agents really know that because the draft night, things happen, trades happen, boom, 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 teams move. You don't really know.
Then why would an experienced agent, as Drew Rosenhaus is, say we're not going to allow you to visit anywhere outside of the top 10? Anybody that's picking outside the top 10, they're off our board, let alone not knowing if we're on their board or not.
Do you want me to go there with Drew Rosenhaus?
Sure. Yeah.
Come on. I mean, we all know, like, Drew Rosenhaus is the agent in a movie that's like the corniest dude ever and the most obnoxious and loudest. So
is this just a smokescreen? Is he actually going to go to?
I mean, it could be, right? It could be a bluff. It could be, pressure for these other teams to say, hey, we got to get him now or else, because if I'm the team looking at that and I'm sitting there number 9 and I really want Jalen Carter, the Bears might think they have a chance for him to fall that far. I mean, teams obviously talk to other teams. They kind of know, hey, we know what their needs are. We know that they're probably not going to be in the market for him, or we know that this team, they might like him. That might force another team to move into the top 10 to go take him if they don't believe that they're going to be able to get him at 11, 12, 15, whatever it may be.
Right, but with all the questions surrounding Jalen Carter, if you're going to make that investment, draft capital along with a top 10 pick, wouldn't you want to at least be able to have a conversation with him and meet with him in person? And maybe you got all your answers during his pro day if you had a chance to meet with him then.
Yeah.
Maybe it happened at the combine. I don't know. Again, there's a lot of things that we just don't know. But let's just say Tennessee, Mike Vrabel calls up Drew Rosenhaus and says, I really want to have a talk and I want to meet with Jalen Carter. Well, it breaks the rule that Drew Rosenhaus has set out there that, we're not going to meet with anybody outside the top 10. And now Vrabel and the Tennessee Titans are sitting there going, well, do we think he was going to be here at 11? Probably not. But maybe we want to package a couple of our picks together to jump up to number 5, number 6, and say, we really want to take Jalen Carter. We think he could really change our franchise, but I don't have a chance to meet with him.
Yeah, and I think that would probably have to be an exception to the rule, where if the team outside the top 10 says, hey, good chance we might trade up back into that top 8 spot, wherever it may be, to take him. Sure, I'm sure that there's exceptions. I think it's stupid that an agent would even say this in the first place.
Right.
Like,
you can have this policy. You don't have to make it public.
I get it. Like, okay, the kid's taking a lot of heat. Some of it probably deserving, some of it probably a little bit overblown when it comes to more of the pro day stuff, right? Nobody really knows what happened there. I mean, everybody said he was that could just be one team, trying to tear this kid down so much just in the name of, gamesmanship to try to get him to fall, right? We don't know that. But it is it's a little bit too arrogant for my liking for a team to say, no, you're not, we're not doing it. Right. Like you have to understand, hey, if there was nothing outside of, no issues outside of football with Jalen Carter, and he said that, I think all of us would be saying, yeah, probably smart. The dude's an absolute freak. No issues, no red flags. Yeah. Right. He's a top 3 talent. Okay. We get that. The fact that all this other shit is coming up is like, dude, I don't really think you're in a place of to have much leverage to start telling all these other teams, don't do it, right? And look, I know a lot of people bring up the La'el Collins situation from a few years back, right? Yeah. We obviously know what happened with him. Just to remind you, there was some sort of, I think his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend at the time had been murdered. He was listed as somebody that the police wanted to talk to. Never ended up getting, the guy was completely innocent. didn't do anything. I think we know that for a fact, but it affected his draft status. But I know this for a fact that when he started to drop, out of the top 10, out of the top 15, it wasn't that teams didn't want to take a chance on him after that. It was more so his agent was telling teams, hey, if you're not going to pick him in the first round, don't pick him because he's not going to sign the deal. He's going to just enter the draft next year. And they played this bluffing game, right? Because the ultimate goal for them was they just said, hey, if we're going to drop to the third, fourth round, we might as well just drop to an undrafted free agent, get to choose our destination where we want to be, find a good spot, sign a 3-year deal instead of a 4, get to free agency sooner, which I think all players love. Certainly in the first 3 years, he lost some money as opposed to being drafted, but worked out better for him. And that was a ploy from the agency, right? To say, we're going to get this guy in a better situation. We're going to pick the team he wants to go to. We're going to get a 3-year deal. He's a first-round talent. We know he's going to sign a big next deal. Let's play it this way. And it worked out for them. With Jalen Carter, I certainly don't think he's going to fall out. He's not going to be that type of drop, right? I don't think he's going to fall out of the first round. I don't think he's going to fall outside the top 15. But I don't know. Right. Like, I don't know. That's the beauty of it, and that's the polarizing process around it, is that me, you, fans, radio listener, anybody, we don't know what those conversations are like behind closed doors. We don't know if Jalen Carter is a great kid who just made a bad decision, one night after winning the national championship, celebrating with his teammates. We don't know if Jalen Carter's a total POS, right? Like, we don't really know. And it's just a bad dude. I'm not saying he is, but we don't know, right? Yeah. And that's something that teams are going to have to figure out. And that's something that probably will never get known, right? Unless the guy, eats himself out of the league in a couple years. We won't know that. But this is such a interesting time being a Lions fan, because obviously we have so much optimism. We have so much hope. And we have 2 guys that kind of our draft centers around, right? And it's Anthony Richardson and it's Jalen Carter, 2 of the most polarizing guys in all of, this preseason hype with the combine and with the draft and with everything coming up and sitting where the Lions sit. They're going to have to make a decision on probably at least one of those guys, if not both. Yeah. Right. But I think that, hey, like we've said many times, it's a bit uncomfortable where we're at as Lion fans, feeling this good, feeling this optimistic, feeling this hopeful.
It's hard to say it out loud.
And I think a lot of that uncomfortable, a lot of those feelings come from the fact that, like, we really haven't had anything to disagree with. You know what I mean? Like, everything that Brad Holmes has done, everybody's pretty much unanimously like, okay, that's a good move. Like, wow, like, that's competent. Wow. Like, that's something we want to have something to bicker about. Hey, well, no, we should have done this. We can't really do that, right? And I think that, hey, man, that's going to open up just a beautiful can of worms on what could potentially happen on draft night. And whether that's Jalen Carter, I think if Anthony Richardson got picked, I think that would be the first time where people were like, okay, whoa, like probably a mix. I'm not saying majority of people, but okay, man, all right, let's see what the plan is at least, right? But that would certainly be good for us, give us something very exciting to talk about. I can't wait, man. Draft night's always awesome, especially with how it's been lately with the moving and with the trades and with, whoa, where'd this guy come? You know what I mean? Like, then, man, it's just it's a couple weeks away. I'm excited. I know you're excited. We got a couple more weeks to talk about it. I think next week we can maybe start to lock in a little bit of our dream scenarios, right? So, what we would want 6, what we want 18, and even delve into, hey, you got 2 more in the second round too. I think both of us would very much look forward to putting out our realistic mock draft.
Yeah, and so I'm glad you went there, because I do want to talk about mock drafts and give our dream scenario for what we think is a realistic situation that could happen for the Lions in the first 2 rounds. They got 4 picks. But I also want to know, I'll share my experience, how mock drafts, if I looked at them, how they affected my mindset as a prospect going into the 99 draft. And I want to know your thoughts on the mock drafts that you saw, where you were projected, and how it affected you leading up to the draft, and then obviously on draft weekend. So we'll get a chance to talk about those topics
taking
next
me
week.
back. To reminisce a little.
Yeah,
taking you way back.
Easy. Not that far. I guess it is. Yeah, it's about 24 years. So, we'll talk about that next week. We thank you for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe to our podcast feed as well as the YouTube feed to make sure that you have the newest version of Necessary Roughness in your inbox every time we come out with an episode. And we will have episodes throughout the entire off season. So stay tuned right here on Necessary Roughness.